Alright guys, today I'm making a small video about why I'm enjoying the Destruction Warlock so much. It seems like Destruction is the most misunderstood and surprising specs of the expansion. The whole elitist private server community said it's a meme spec without really giving any reason as to why. Now that Wrath of the Lich King has turned up, it's actually much better than people thought. It's definitely not as good as the other specs by any stretch of the imagination. They are roughly 10 to 20% ahead of the Destruction Warlock, and if you compare logs of a Destro log to other classes, they're in the ballpark of being fairly similar to a Frost Death Knight or a Survival Hunter. But bear in mind, because barely anyone plays Destruction Warlock, in fact only 4% of current passing Warlocks are Destruction, you can't have a big amount of results to compare against. But without a doubt they can pump the same numbers as a Frost DK or a Survival Hunter. By the way guys, if you are looking for Warlock macros and weak auras and add-ons, I have a huge list that subscribers can get if they just subscribe to the channel. Check the description of my subscriber only video. So established that Destruction definitely isn't a meme spec, but what's more important is that the spec is extremely fun to play. It's probably the simplest of the Warlock specs, but this is great for me because I personally don't have a lot of time to play the game, and this Warlock is my ult. This means when I go and play my ult, I can quickly jump into the action and pump DPS without having to spend a large amount of time reading guides and scanning through the Warlock Discord for nuanced information. Personally, I've been looking at the top logs on Warcraft logs to figure out what spells I should be using and what priority I should be doing. And it does seem to be pretty simple, but you should just keep up Immolate with as close to 100% uptime as you can, then you recast it when the dot duration is 1.5 seconds away or 1 second during a Bloodlust. You can Flaggerate on cooldown, but always finish your cast before popping it. Then you Chaos Bolt, and then you use Incinerate as your filler. An essential glyph you have to pick up is Glyph of Conflag, because this stops your Immolate from being consumed when you use Conflag. It will now stay on the target to do its full dot damage. So in short, you're always prioritising refreshing Immolate and using Conflagrate before you use a Chaos Ball. This is because Conflag gives you the backdraft buff. This reduces the global cooldown and cast duration of your next I have had 2 attempts at that, I don't know why it's such a tongue twister. So it reduces the global cooldown and cast duration of your next destruction ability as long as they are not channeled abilities. So this will reduce the global cooldown of spells like Shadow Fury and Shadow Flame also. But obviously the main reason why it's such a priority is because it will speed up your casts. The buff does actually last 15 seconds, so you can have it ready before a boss fight if you can flag a trash mob. And if you time it perfectly, you can get 6 backdraft casts in a row. I've only been doing this obviously on dungeon bosses because in a raid you have to pull the boss straight after a trash mob, which you're only really going to be doing if you're in a try-hard speedrunning group, in which case you probably have to play a different spec. But I just thought I'd give you that little tip. It really is important to have as many backdraft buffs as possible because it just allows you to cast your spells faster, which is a big DPS increase. During this buff, when you've got Bloodlust up on your haste pot, you're actually casting Incinerate in less than 1 second, which is very, very fun. Unique to the Destruction spec is also the Shadow Fury ability, which is an AoE stun that can be cast at range like Rain of Fire. This is a fun ability, but I haven't really noticed much of a DPS increase difference between using this ability and just spamming Seed of Corruption. Seed just does so much raw damage, which is a shame because I thought Destruction would have their own unique way of dealing AoE damage in Wrath of the Lich King, but they don't really. It's just the same old spam Seed. Perhaps when we get more crits, at least Shadow Flame and Shadow Fury will scale better, so it's actually viable to use them more often, since his abilities will benefit from 100% extra crit damage buff provided by the Ruin talent, where Seed doesn't obviously benefit from this. The thing is, you do actually talent out of Shadow Fury when you're boss passing anyway. But for now, it is very useful because if you pull aggro with Seed, you can stun the mob so you have more time to drop aggro, prevent you from dying, and the utility use can be very, very useful in raids when it comes to ad management. Another thing I've started speculating about is Soulfire. Now, I've not seen any logs of any top passers messing around with Soulfire. Okay, so Soulfire is a long casted ability of 3.5 seconds, and it consumes a Soul Shard, but does insane damage, just under Chaos Bolt. But obviously with a large cast time, it's a long, hard cast, so why cast it where you can probably do 2 Incinerates in the same amount of time? Well, if you have the backdraft buff, the cast time is going to be, 2.5 seconds. And if you've empowered Imp buff, it will be a guaranteed crit. So when those line up together, you're spending 2.5 seconds to get an AK crit off. That's an AK crit, by the way, when you're unbuffed with my tests. So it could obviously potentially hit for more damage when you are in a raid group. But it's probably really only worth it when you have very low crit chance, because you only need 1 Incinerate to crit for 2 Incinerates to equal the damage of Soulfire. And this is because many talents buff the damage of Incinerate by a certain percentage, whereas they don't include Soulfire into their equation. Which is a shame, because I think if they did, it would actually be viable to be using Soulfire in the rotation. If you just sniped it with certain buffs, like the rotation would be way more interesting if you consumed all of your backdraft buffs with Soulfire instead of Incinerate, and Soulfire had, again, all the damage increasing buffs that Incinerate has, but unfortunately that is not the case. But it definitely would add, obviously, another spell to the rotation and make it a bit more of an interesting and complex class. But anyway, this brings up a cool change that every Warlock spec has received. Our pets in some way or another will always boost your personal DPS, so it's always viable to have a pet out. Destruction uses the Imp, which I prefer. The Imp has much less risk of dying, because he doesn't have to go into melee range. His health pool has also been dramatically increased, and whenever he crits with his Firebolt, this increases the crit chance of your next ability by 100%. And obviously you pray that this lines up with your Chaos Bolt. It will also work on all of your abilities, so this is a nice buff to your Seed of Corruption damage also. His little Fire Shield is also semi-useful if you want to give it to tanks. It also provides a cheeky bit of fire resistance if you can't get that from anywhere else like a Paladin. Another bonus in the Destruction spec is obviously the Replenishment buff, provided by the Soul Leech talent. Firstly, it gives a Warlock a 30% chance to replenish 20% of the damage he deals as healing, and 2% of your total mana, and then provides a replenishment buff on top of that, which is 1% total mana for every 5 seconds for 10 other raid members. The talent does work out as a personal DPS increase, so it's always good to have. So you don't have to feel like, oh, I can pick up other DPS increase in talents without supporting a raid. There's no way that you can selfishly build your Warlock, fortunately, because you're always going to be providing that good buff to the raid. Destruction can also become extremely tanky with talents without having to adjust their rotation or lose too much DPS. According to Sims, the max DPS loss when I went for over beefy talents was a 200 DPS loss, which is not much when you consider how much more tanky you can become. It's also why they're very good in PvP and are considered immortal against other spellcaster comps. But anyway, you have the Soul Leech talent like we mentioned earlier, which heals us. This becomes very, very useful when healers are lower mana on longer fights and obviously progression fights. You can pick up Never Protection 2. This has a 30% chance to reduce magic damage taken by 30% for 8 seconds. It will only prevent damage on the school of magic you were hit by. And on top of all this, you can just get one cheeky point in Soul Link. This means 20% of the damage you take hits your Imp instead, and with the Fel Synergy talent it's fine because it keeps the pet topped up. The Imp also by default takes 90% damage from AoE effects. Obviously in Phase 1 this isn't really going to be useful because the raids are so easy, but this beefier Warlock build will become very powerful for more challenging content like Ulduar hard modes, so I'm definitely looking forward to that. But anyway guys, that's going to be the end of the video there. Be sure to check out my second channel as always, which is called Night Goblin. My name is MetaGoblin. Until my next video, ciao.